public session just we are court as we've been in closed session. A brief overview of today's business. The committee will then have moved into open session for the remainder of the meeting. It will consider propose to make a statutory rule relating to student fees and will consider 2 statutory rules relating to the blacklisting of trained union activists and student support. We'll then receive a briefing from the Minister for Employment and Learning on structured deliver success and on the current issues. And finally, the committee will be briefed by the University of Ulster on the establishment of a School of Veterinary Medicine. Okay, members, just moving on then. Apologies. I've received apologies for David McClarty and Pat Ramsey. Any other apologies? Thank you. Chairperson's business. Just advise members, the Central Committee Office has requested that you remember to switch on your tablets over the Easter recess, and this will enable any updates just to take place during that period. Members, at page 11 is an updated list of the submissions to the inquiry, which can be found in the inquiry SharePoint. There's also a report from Dr Bernie Kelly from Queen's University Belfast entitled Don't Boss Me In, Disability Identity Transitions to Young Adult Life, and this has also been added to the inquiry SharePoint as well. Members, at page 13 is a visit from the committee's visit to Castletower Special School last week as part of the inquiry and contains the papers provided to the committee by the school principal that day. Members, I just seek agreement to include all submissions on the revisit report as part of the inquiry. Agreed?
Great.
Thank you. Okay, members, draft minutes. Draft minutes of our last meeting are at page 60 of the pack and for the meeting of the 26th of March. Members, do you agree that those draft minutes are an accurate record of the meeting?
Agreed.
Agreed, then I sign them as being correct. Members, matters arising then. Matters arising are at page 69 of the pack. Members, I've nothing specific coming out of those, but just to agree the action points from the last committee meeting. Agreed?
Yep.
Okay, members, moving on then. Point 6 is correspondence, as at page 74 of your packs and also was tabled. Members, just probably to note, is at page 76 is the correspondence from the Director of Compass Advocacy Network requesting that the committee visits its projects in the Causeway area as part of the inquiry into post-school SEND provision. Members, is actually an inquiry to ask us to come and see them as part of the inquiry, so you're content that we schedule that visit in?
Yep.
Yeah, sounds
Okay.
good. Yep.
Thank you, members. Members, at page 113 is details of the EU Integrated Forum 2014, and it's a conference on Europe's lost generation and how to combat the scourge of youth unemployment. It's in Barcelona from 29th to the 30th of September. It was forwarded to the committee by Phil Flanagan, who received it. Members, any comments? Okay, members. Just note. Yep. Okay, members. Just actions on correspondence as suggested agreed, unless indications to the contrary. Members content? Nothing else in correspondence? Members, draft forward work programme, page 146. The draft forward work programme has now been scheduled up to and including the 2nd of July, and just other briefings may be scheduled as they arise. Members, you will see that there is a start of legislation and work in there as well, so
It's not actually in.
it's not it will be. Well, it will be moving in, so just to make you aware of that. Members, could I just advise you that also we've got two visits as part of an inquiry. Wednesday the 14th of May, the committee will visit Appleby Trust Armagh, followed by Sperrinview Special School in Dungannon. And could I just ask members, to be aware, Johnny circulated an email yesterday that would be an all-day visit to make the both of them. Members, also on that day, could I just agree there as well as Oakridge Day Centre in Dungannon also as part of that day, and we're more than happy to facilitate it as well, because it gives us the opportunity to see a daycare centre, which we have for them as well. Members content?
Yep.
Okay, members, just in regard to that as well, and on our day, I suppose, on our visits, the committee will not meet again until after Easter recess, and on return the committee will visit the University of Ulster Coleraine campus on Wednesday the 30th of April, and this will be followed by Seagate Technology in Londonderry at 1 p.m. The visit was agreed at the meeting on the 11th of December, and again, members to be aware, it will be an all-day event, so just to be.
And it's a joint visit with the Committee for Enterprise, Trade and Investment.
And it's a joint DETI committee visit as well, so there will be the two
Chair,
committees
can
there.
I just have it recorded? I'll only be at one of those visits because I have OFM, DFM in the afternoon.
That's all right.
Same.
Same.
So
Okay,
you-
Chris.
Does that mean you'll go to the Coleraine campus and
And
the
they did-
afternoon
what
one
did
and
I-
not go at all?
I definitely can't go to the afternoon, and I'll confirm the morning section with you ASAP. I think you're confirming the morning section. So
Yeah,
it's
right.
not the same.
Thank you.
Fair enough.
But you're okay for Armagh and Dungannon?
I'll be there
The
all
full
day.
day? That's all right. Okay, members, subordinate legislation then, moving on to agenda point 8, is the SL1, the student fees amount amendment regulations Northern Ireland 2014. Members, this is page 149 of the pack. The Department proposes to make this statutory rule to provide for the annual increase using the inflationary forecast of 3.34% for the academic year 2015-16 provided by Treasury. Either prescribed basic and higher amounts which higher education institutions in Northern Ireland may charge to students who are ordinarily resident in Northern Ireland and accepted others. The proposed inflationary increase are in line with the Minister's announcement on September 2011 that following agreement with the Northern Ireland Executive, the cap on higher education fees for Northern Ireland students and accepted others studying in Northern Ireland will be maintained at current levels, subject only to annual inflationary increases. It is proposed that the provisions will come into operation on the 1st of September 2015, and members, this statutory rule is subject to negative resolution. Are members content with the proposals for the statutory rule? Members agreed? Thank you. Okay, members, agenda point 9 then is the statutory rule 2014-88, the employment regulations Northern Ireland Order 1999, blacklists regulations Northern Ireland 2014, and members, this is page 153 of your packs. The Department has laid a statutory rule on the 25th of March 2014. The Department proposes to make a statutory rule which will prohibit the communication, distribution and use of lists, otherwise known as blacklists, whose purpose is to facilitate discrimination against trade union members and activists by employers and employment agencies. The main effects of the rules make it unlawful for an organisation to refuse employment, to dismiss an employee, or otherwise cause detriment to a worker for a reason related to a blacklist, or for an employment agency to refuse a service to a worker for a reason related to a blacklist. The statutory rule is subject to negative resolution and is due to come into operation on the 6th of April 2014. Members of the committee considered the proposal to make the statutory rule at its meeting on the 11th of December and agreed that was content with the proposed statutory rule, although the committee agreed to write to the Department of Finance and Personnel and ask what action will be taken against companies who are found who have operated blacklists. The committee considered and noted the response from the Department of Finance and Personnel at its meeting on the 15th of January 2014. There has been no change to the policy content since the proposal was submitted, and the examiner of statutory rules has no issue to raise. Are members content with the rule?
Yep.
If so, members, that the Committee for Employment and Learning has considered SR 2014-88, the Employment Regulations Northern Ireland Order 1999, blacklists regulations Northern Ireland 2014, and has no objection to the rule.
Right.
Thank you, members. Members, at point 10 then is the Statutory Rule 2014-97, the Education Student Support Number 2 Regulations Northern Ireland 2009 Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2014, and members, is page 175 of the pack. The Department has laid a statutory rule on the 28th of March, the Education Student Support Number 2 Regulations Northern Ireland 2019, Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2014 will amend the Principal Student Support Regulations to make provision for student financial support for students who hold a part-time Level 4 or 5 qualification entering the first year of a degree course. The statutory rule is subject to negative resolution and is due to come into operation on the 18th of April 2014. The committee considered the proposal to make the statutory rule at its meeting on the 19th of February and agreed that was content with the proposed statutory rule. There's been no change to the policy content since the proposal was submitted, and the examiner of statutory rules has no point to raise on this rule. Are members content with the rule? If so, members, the Department for Employment and Learning has considered SR 2014-97, the Education Student Support No. 2 Regulations Northern Ireland 2009, Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2014, and has no objection to the rule. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you, members. Members, we're currently waiting on the Minister to appear for our next briefing. Could I move on while we're waiting then? Agenda point 13, any other business?
Just wait. With here is the Minister has it's very prompt funding. Chair. So therefore, so much he has spent. I want to ask him about this.
Okay, members, no other business. We'll wait on the Minister coming.
Yeah.
Where is he?
It shows the briefing only came last night.
Right.
Briefing from the department because the paper came in late. I should maybe take the briefing. He said I didn't think that we were getting anything from the Minister. This is sad. No, it was issued last.
This is everywhere else.
I turn.
Good morning.
Morning, Minister. Morning, Catherine. You're very welcome. This morning's session, members, this is a ministerial briefing on the structure to success of current issues. Members, just to be aware, this session will be covered by Hansard, so electronic devices should be switched off, excluding the tablet device you're using to view your committee pack. So, Minister, over to you, and you're very welcome. Members, page 17. I think we only received the briefing paper late last night, Minister, so I would stress that members may not have had time to read it all and digest it. So
Yes. That's quite all right, Chair. We apologise for the late arrival. We are usually very diligent in this regard. Good morning, officially, and we'll probably have through to about 11:30 or so, so we've just over an hour that we can run for this session. And there's probably two purposes that we can focus upon. The first one is just to briefly touch upon the paper that we have circulated. And if members want to focus particularly on Annex A, that will probably fairly neatly encapsulate the essence of the paper. And that is there just to give a sense of structure to the various strategies that we're currently deploying or seeking to develop at present. The second aspect of why we're here is just to have a general stocktake exercise, and I'll briefly report on where we are on some of the major issues facing the department, and we can just have a free-flowing Q&A from members. We can range far and wide in that, with the usual slight disclaimer that given that we don't have any pre-advance warning of the topics, that we'll do our best to answer them today, but we may need to come back to you in writing if there's any particular points of detail that we can't cover just today. Briefly, just on the paper itself. This is a reiteration of a paper we produced in 2012, and is entitled "Structure to Deliver Success." Members have at times expressed some concern over the number of strategies that we currently have as a department, and that we're also developing some more on top of that. I should also clarify that the committee are asking us to develop some of the strategies themselves, so you are contributing to this situation. But I think it's important that we do make a couple of points around all of this. First of all, we believe that having strategies in place is actually of fundamental importance because it brings a degree of coherence to policy in certain areas. It formulates policy, also creates a series of targets quite frequently in relation to the delivery of policy and changes, and creates opportunities for measurement of our progress in terms of transforming the skills landscape in Northern Ireland, and also then provides clearer opportunities for accountability. So in some respects it actually works to the advantage of the committee, that you have a very clear line of sight as to what we should be doing as a department, and where we're falling short in that regard, you have the opportunity to question us and to draw our attention to those issues and to ask what is happening and what further steps can be taken, or corrective steps can be taken to address those type of issues. I think it's worth stressing that in terms of all the strategies that we have, it is the skills strategy that is the overarching strategy for the department. And it's useful to see the skills strategy as being the third layer of three core documents that relate to the economy in Northern Ireland. Those being, first of all, the programme for government as the overarching strategy for the executive as a whole, and then the economic strategy, again, which is a cross-departmental strategy endorsed by the executive, and then the skills strategy, which specifically looks at the skills needs over the course of this decade, and members will be familiar with that strategy and the skills targets within it. And quite simply, we need more higher level skills, and as you know, there are a number of pathways to achieving that, and we also need a greater footprint in terms of STEM skills, so we're very much seized of those. But beneath that then, we have a series of different strategies which focus upon different aspects of the department's work, which are all very much geared towards the delivery of the overarching skills objectives in that strategy. I don't propose to go into those one by one. You will be familiar with all or most of those, but in essence they can be seen through three different categories. First of all, those for people entering the labour market from further and higher education, people who are already in work but need to be further upskilled, and those who are not currently within the labour force. And then there's a number of cross-cutting interventions, the latest of which being the new careers strategy itself. So we can drill down into those in any greater detail during the Q&A session, Chair. In terms then of a wider stock take, just to give a flavour of where we stand on a number of particular issues. First of all, careers, something that's been very close to the heart of the work of this committee over the past number of years. We have now announced the way forward in terms of the formal review of careers on a joint departmental basis. The panel is meeting for the first time next Wednesday, and we should be this week formally issuing a joint press statement with the Department of Education setting out the members of that panel. But you will know that it is to be chaired by Brian Ambrose, who's the Chief Executive of George Best Belfast City Airport, who has a long-standing interest in this area and has also advised the Executive on a number of economic issues. In terms of issues that are currently very much to the forefront of our agenda as a department, and issues that you're likely to see progress on over the coming weeks. First of all, these aren't in any order of importance, just in terms of things that are likely to come before the committee in sequence. First of all, just to report to you that our legislation for the Working Families Bill has been approved by the Executive this week, and the first stage of that will be on the first Monday after the Easter recess, and then the second stage of that debate will take place in early May, and subject to the approval of the Assembly, then that bill will be referred to this committee for detailed scrutiny. I know, Chair, you've asked that plenty of time be set aside for the committee to work through all of the issues, and we're more than happy for that to be the case. So again, we'll work very closely with you through all of those issues, and our officials will be available to advise you and to provide any information at any stage you require that. Also, in terms of other employment law issues, you will be aware of recent coverage in the media around the issue of 0 hours contracts, and probably asking at what stage a briefing can be made to the committee on where things stand on this. We're still at a fairly early stage in this regard, but we have agreed as a department that we do want to have a consultation on 0 hours contracts in Northern Ireland. Hopefully that consultation will be commencing this side of the summer recess. We do appreciate that the committee will want to see sight on that and have a briefing as to what we think are the emerging issues at the earliest opportunity. But a question was asked in the Assembly, and I thought it appropriate to give an answer in terms of where we currently see things. In short, we recognise that we are in a fast evolving economic situation, and our labour market also has to be something that will be changing in conjunction with the nature of our economy. It's important to recognise that employment structures do evolve themselves, and that 0 hours contracts or limited hour contracts are very much part of the modern employment landscape, not just in Northern Ireland, but also in other jurisdictions. They do provide, particularly when they are appropriately used, flexibility for employers, and also some employees will regard them favourably as giving them a degree of flexibility in relation to their own personal or family lives, or, for example, people who are in education. So as a consequence, we're not proposing that they be banned or outlawed in Northern Ireland. However, we do recognise that there is significant concern in relation to them. That's been expressed by a number of MLAs directly, but also people in wider civic society in Northern Ireland, in particular trade unions. And that concern, I think, is primarily around a number of aspects, and those are the issues that we do want to focus the consultation around. There's probably two different areas that we do want to have a look at. One would be the use of exclusivity clauses that would prevent people from taking on other types of employment, and that leaves people solely dependent upon the hours that are coming from a certain company or organisation. And in particular, that can contribute to a situation where people are suffering from irregular earnings, unpredictable earnings, which then has an impact upon budgeting, has an impact upon family life, and other knock-on consequences. And secondly, that there's sometimes a lack of transparency around 0 hours contracts. There's no, for example, there's no clear definition as to what they are in terms of employment law as things stand, and within that, people may not know that they're actually in that situation, and indeed know what their rights are on the back of that. Our counterparts in Great Britain have just concluded their own consultation. I believe there's something like 37,000 responses to that consultation, which gives you an indication of the degree of interest that there's out there in that regard. And I think I've received over 1,000 emails on the issue as well in the past week or so. So it is an issue where there's a lot of concern in the community. So I think if we have a consultation, that will then allow the committee, the Assembly and the Executive in due course to find what is the right balance for Northern Ireland in terms of providing flexibility to employers and certain employees at the same time as giving proper protection to workers in what is an evolving structure of employment. We'll also hopefully bring to the committee in the near future our assessment on the summary of responses to the consultation on employment law, which is a comprehensive piece of work. There's some aspects of that we're still bottoming out, but that will be part of your agenda during the spring session of the Assembly. Other issues that are worth mentioning is that the review of apprenticeships closed this week. On Monday, and so we're now reviewing those responses, and we will hope to have a final policy statement and the first action plan in relation to apprenticeships in place before the summer recess. There will be a number of issues in parallel that we will continue to work upon, in particular the funding model around apprenticeships and how we best engage businesses, which are two crucial issues with respect to implementation. We're also working through the review of youth training. And we believe this is of fundamental importance to the future of skills and also to inclusion of everyone in society. And that very much complements the review of apprenticeships. And it's there to essentially for those people who are leaving school without many qualifications, but who have the potential to engage in the labour market. And this is designed to help them into sustainable employment or to enable them to progress into apprenticeships or into mainstream further education or indeed into higher education. So it's a very broad area and it will include a diverse range of young people. So that review is in an advanced stage. We will hopefully make a statement on progress in that regard to the Assembly again before the summer recess, and we'll be working towards a consultation document possibly before the summer or maybe realistically into September. But I do think it's appropriate we give a formal stock take as to where we stand and our emerging thinking in that regard, because I know it's an issue of great interest to a lot of members. You'll also be aware that the Department is now taking on the lead with respect to the design of the United Youth Programme. This is very much a cross-cutting issue for a number of executive departments. So we're working closely with OFM, DFM in particular in that regard. And we have some initial design concepts in that regard, and we will be looking for an opportunity to brief the committee on our thinking on that over the next number of weeks as well. Economic inactivity, again, the consultation in that regard closes in about 10 days' time. This is a joint strategy with the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Investment, and also supported by a number of other government departments. We've had a number of very useful stakeholder engagement events in that regard, and we'll be looking to finalise the strategy over the coming weeks as well. And again, we'll keep the committee fully informed of that. We're also working on a disability employment strategy, which is a review of our different interventions in terms of the Disability Employment Service. And again, there will be progress in that regard during the course of this year. It's likely that a draft strategy will be available probably around about September time. And the final point to make as well is something the committee's taken some interest in is the second phase of the review of the teacher training infrastructure. We're expecting to receive the report from the panel within the next number of weeks. They have essentially concluded their engagement with stakeholders, and they're now in their consideration and drafting stage. And again, we're happy to facilitate briefings for the committee in that regard once that report has been received and considered by myself. And I know you're keen to take evidence from a number of the stakeholders in parallel with my consideration in that regard. So hopefully, Chair, that's a quick overview of some of the big issues facing the department and also the committee. And we're happy now to take questions on anything anyone wishes to raise with us.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. I suppose, first of all, and I did really know, it's just the lateness of this document does make it very difficult for members actually to question you on it, but that's, we can come back to that, because, you know, the strategies are here, and I think it came out from a question that I've raised and a point that I made. The department was, well, at that stage was 430 recommendations, never mind the number of strategies that have been included in this paper. In your briefing, when you were talking about this paper, you talked about the targets and it enabled you to measure. Where's your outcomes? Where do you produce the outcomes of all these strategies, of all the 430 recommendations?
Okay, well first of all, just to reiterate, Chair, the importance of strategies. And I think it's important that we are comprehensive in terms of what we're doing. I mean, this is a very broad department in terms of our ability to intervene in relation to the skills landscape, employability. And so we are touching people from all walks of life with different basis in terms of their education and training to date. And it's important that we don't simply try to capture everyone through one or two strategies that are so broad-based that they're meaningless, and we're not really drilling down and recognising the very particular issues that are being faced by different cohorts of the population. So that's why we need different strategies for different parts of the stakeholders we're engaging with. Where I think you would have some cause for concern is if we had overlapping strategies or contradictory strategies or pulling in different directions, and I'm satisfied that that's not the case. In terms of our delivery of the strategies, we take a very close watch in terms of the implementation. There are targets; those are assessed, whether it's at an official level within the department. And I'll invite Catherine in a moment just to report on the how internally at an official civil service level those strategies are monitored, but also at a political level. Both myself and my special advisor, we consistently have meetings with the different divisions, the owners of the different strategies, to consider on a periodic basis the implementation of those, and that includes following through both on the interventions that people say they're going to do as part of the strategies, but also looking at the uptake in terms of the different targets that we have. All of this is channeled towards us meeting our objectives in terms of the skills profile of our economy. And we know that we have to have a major step change over the course of the decade in terms of higher level skills if we are to be globally competitive, because we're very much in a race to the top here in terms of skills. Do you want to, Catherine, just elaborate?
Just maybe before Catherine comes in, I appreciate the broad scope of the strategies. You know, as you said in your briefing, you know, the committee has put forward other strategies. It's not a criticism of the number that's there. It's a massing about the actual practical outcomes and how they're measured. Now, you've mentioned in your answer, you know, you and your SPAD sit down and review the outcomes and the recommendations and where we are. Where's the wider scope of proof that these strategies are actually working?
Well, you will see that in terms of the changes that you will see on the ground in terms of outcomes. Now, there is a certain lead-in time around a number of the interventions that we make. So, to give you one example, if we invest in more university places, you have a built-in lead-in time of 3 or 4 years before you see someone starting a university course and then emerging on the far side. That's a slightly easier one to measure. There are other changes in relation, say, for example, to the careers review, which the committee is very keen to push, where we concur with yourselves. That's an important area. That's something where you're going to see change happening over a much longer period, where you will see a realignment of how people are supported in terms of their choices, how they're mentored, and a closer alignment between what people are choosing to study or be trained in with the emerging needs of the labour market. Some of these will be a slightly slower burn. Some of them will produce more readily tangible results. There's other examples, say for example something like the Pathways to Success strategy, where we will make a commitment to try to support X number of people over a period of time across the programmes, where those things can be measured much more readily. So it depends upon the particular type of intervention that you are making as to how readily you will see those changes in terms of what's on the face of the strategies. But all of them will be contributing to rebalancing of our skills profile within Northern Ireland.
Perhaps if I give you an example of how within the department we keep track of what's going on. Obviously, the overarching document is the programme for government, and the commitments within the programme for government that are set for us, and that is done every quarter and reported on every quarter. And those targets really are the high-level targets that all these strategies fit into. Every new strategy that we develop after consultation and after it's implemented is run through project and programme management techniques. So there are timescales, milestones which are monitored, and you have senior people who take responsibility for that. But the department also has its business plan, which really sets out the big targets that come through these strategies. Again, that's reported on quarterly, and in fact we've just finished the final quarter for 2013-14, and the committee, I think, gets copies of our progress on the business plan. So all of the targets, the big targets that are in the strategies that we have still to implement, are reported on quarterly. In the case of United Youth, which literally we have just taken responsibility for on behalf of the executive, is it's a monthly project board meeting, and again, we're at the design, we're not at the outcomes yet.
Okay. Sorry, just to be clear, you've just taken responsibility for
United
the
Youth
youth programme?
Yeah.
In the past number of months, yeah.
Right. Have you a budget line for that yet, or timeline of what it's going to achieve? Or?
Well, you'll be aware of the headline terms of reference that were set out as part of the Together Building a United Community statement and strategy in the spring of last year. We are probably from about, it was the end of January when it was formally transferred to the department. So we are now taking forward the detailed design work in relation to this. And we report in turn to a ministerial panel which was set up under the Together Building a United Community strategy, which is chaired by the First Minister and Deputy First Minister. So that's the accountability strand around that. At this stage, no budgets have been allocated towards that, but it's useful maybe to view it in terms of being a successor to some of the interventions that the department currently has, in particular the Youth Employment Scheme and the Pathways to Success strategy. If you bear in mind that those have been funded by the executive to the tune of £40 million over a 3-year period. Those programmes come to an end in April 2015. Now, the United Youth Programme is a much more broad-based intervention than the objectives of either of those two initiatives, but we would expect that the successor to Pathways to Success in terms of the programmes, the successor to the Youth Employment Scheme, will be subsumed within United Youth. Now, we will have to bid for resources from the executive to fund United Youth, including the successors to those interventions. But where things have been successful, I would be hopeful that we can bid for resources. You'll also be aware that the executive does regard this type of work as being a major priority, and hopefully resources will flow and reflect the emerging priorities of the executive in that regard. But all of this has to be viewed in the context of what is at this stage an uncertainty budgetary situation going ahead. We have some very immediate political issues which aren't my direct responsibility nor the committee's, but obviously they're there in the background, and then we're still uncertain as to the implications of the next CSR for Northern Ireland. So within that envelope, nonetheless, there would be an expectation that funding would reflect the emerging priorities of the executive.
So Pathways to Success and Youth Employment Scheme will come to an end and be subsumed within the United Youth Programme. That would be the...
Yeah, that's our working assumption at this stage. It's maybe useful just to deconstruct Pathways to Success into two different elements. There are some aspects of Pathways to Success which are structural changes. I'll give you one example, is around the unique learner number, which was a key recommendation in the committee's report in this regard. That allows us to better track progress, first of all within our own programmes, but secondly, as we work with the Department of Education, we can have a much more rounded system. So that is something that will be a freestanding piece of work that will move beyond April 2015. But the funding initiatives under Pathways to Success, for example, the Collaboration and Innovation Fund, those at this stage are funded to that point, and the expectation would be that they would be subsumed into a much broader United Youth programme after April 15.
Right, so United Youth won't be new, it'll be a...
Oh no, but there will also be new elements within Unite Youth. It isn't simply just a rebranding of those. It is a mixture of community relations, volunteering and employability interventions. What we're saying, Chair, is that those strands of existing work will dovetail into that. Unite Youth is designed to be a much broader intervention. I mean, hence the fact it's actually across executive strategy rather than being something that are solely for this department to take forward. But we are, given our major footprint in terms of employability, the view was that we were the most logical department to take forward the detailed design work. It was something that we do in collaboration with our other partners in different departments, rather than being something that we do ourselves solely on an internal basis.
Okay, thanks. David?
Thanks, Chair, and welcome the Minister along this morning. It was just an issue to return to that I've raised on a number of occasions, and it's in relation to the agency workers. And we do, some of our most skilled and dependable workers are employed through agencies. Is there any idea of figures, numbers in relation to how many it affects at this stage, Minister? Or are you aware of that?
Yeah, you're talking, David, in terms of the profile within our economy of agency workers,
Yeah.
such as how many they are. We don't have a figure with us today. We can try to obtain that for you. There may well be difficulties in getting those figures, but we'll see what we can do to address that. But again, I mean, you will be aware agency workers are very much part and parcel of the modern structure of employment.
Very important.
We've had the Agency Workers Directive now in place since December 2011, and it's a piece of work that we are reviewing at present. So there's a review of the implementation of the Agency Workers Directive in terms of how that's actually working on the ground. Have you any particular concerns around the...
Sure, there's varying conditions out there, and you get different issues, different complaints, different matters being raised on a regular basis. Probably in relation to individuals who are skilled at the moment, but wanting to upskill and enhance their capacity. Because of the conditions of employment and whatnot and stuff, they just don't get the opportunities there. The employer they're working to is not going to do it. The agency is not interested in doing it.
Yeah.
Everybody's out to make a buck at the end of the day. They're not really particularly interested in individuals.
Yeah. Well, in that sense, then you raise an interesting point and challenge, which is in essence that if an employer is making an investment in one as a long-term employee, they will see the value of training. If someone is taking workers on a temporary basis, training then becomes is viewed as being less of an issue for the employer per se, and becomes more of a challenge for the state. We will need to reflect in terms of the balance of our interventions to see then how we can support workers who find themselves in that situation in terms of our programmes. But in saying that, it does point to a challenge in that in many other economies around the world, in particular advanced economies, there is a partnership between the state and employers in terms of how the direct costs of training are funded. In Northern Ireland already, we are very heavily weighted towards the state paying, in some cases, 100% costs of training. So we're already top heavy at one end of the spectrum. So there's a challenge out there for employers to come forward in relation to how they can better invest in training. Now, there are moves afoot in terms of different types of financial incentives for employers that could be put in place by HMRC. Now, those are being developed primarily in relation to support for apprenticeships, and indeed I'm going to be in London tomorrow and having discussions with the Department of Business, Innovation and Skills over how they see that unfolding. But we will seek to ask the question as to how that can support employers in terms of resourcing training on a much broader basis. Kathleen, you want to...
No, I mean, we have our skills solutions team that will go in directly to onto an employer's premises and engage with them on the training that their staff needs. But I suppose it's difficult if they're agency workers and they're in on a temporary contract. But nonetheless, it is something that we need to consider. How do we keep agency workers up to date? And it's certainly something that I haven't considered before. So, but I don't know how we would do it because
I think we need a strategy for it, Catherine.
I'm writing enough at the minute. But I do think we need to, but it's not an easy answer, because the person isn't with the employer for a length of time to be able to go in and do an intervention.
Though some of them are, you know, if you were able to get a grip on the numbers and where they are located and whatnot, you will
We might be
see,
able to.
you will see that there are patterns where there are long-term
Yeah.
employment with agency workers as well.
Well,
And I don't want to put specifics on the table today, but there are general issues over conditions for them, you know, there's no doubt. And it keeps reoccurring, and I know we've raised it before, but without having to introduce a strategy potentially,
Yeah.
if any look at it would be very welcome.
Yeah. Well, would it be useful, Chair, if David had the opportunity to meet with my officials in that regard, and we'll make sure a meeting is organised. So in relation to the review of agency workers, maybe set your concerns out in detail, and if you have particular points you want to make in a closed format, that would be the place to do it.
I do understand the employer's point of view as well, and how important it is to them, and it's not for a public forum, potentially for debate.
Yeah.
Just one other issue, we had a very successful presentation from people involved in sport and education here recently, based in East Belfast. Others have been trying to do it as well. I think it's through the Met College, is it? Belfast Met. Others have been trying to do it in other parts of the country, but just don't seem to be getting the support from further education. And I think it's a very important angle in relation to particularly the needs and people, that if we can try to develop that. But there didn't seem to be an interest in it. And I know some other folk who are organising these things and taking the lead rather than the college as such. The college is the lesser partner, but they don't seem to be getting a lot of support at the minute. Potentially, is there something we can do about that, particularly also in female participation in sport?
I think from the Belfast Met's perspective, I think they have got funding outside the mainstream further education funding that the department would pick up. But there's no doubt about it. Sport is it's a very useful tool to engage people who are disengaged, and the facilities that colleges have, particularly most of the colleges have, we should be exploiting them. Again, I haven't I don't know of any organisations that have gone to colleges and have been turned away.
No, Catherine, haven't been turned away, but they just don't get the feeling that there's a good, robust support for it,
Right,
such,
okay.
and potentially get turned down for requests for equipment and stuff like that, which they need, to be honest, to keep the thing going. But
And are you saying that Belfast Met has been responsive?
no,
Right.
Belfast Met's a success story.
Yeah.
There's others out in the country who just haven't got the same support and backup that Belfast Met.
Well, maybe what we should do is to ask the colleges meet together once a month. Maybe we should ask Belfast Met to speak to the other
Yes, no,
colleges
yeah,
about what
I think
they
that'd be
do.
very useful.
There's no problem about that.
Thank you.
Okay. Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. There's 3 areas I wouldn't mind asking a couple of questions. First of all, around the skills and skills shortages. Obviously, there's been quite a bit of news in the last couple of days about the situation at Harlan and Wolff.
Yeah.
I think all of us understand there's EU law about free movement of labour and all that, and that's perfectly legitimate. But there has been things said by some other Assembly members around skilled Northern Ireland workers being overlooked for the jobs. I just wonder if you would comment on whether or not there is actually a skills shortage for the specific work that's going on in Harlan and Wolff. And if there is a skills shortage in that kind of labour, are we looking at that as a department? And the second part around the skills stuff, obviously, within the document you've provided, you've talked about securing Northern Ireland's future in a global marketplace. Much of the work that we're getting in terms of FDI is around financial services and ICT and data management and things like that. And as the economy picks up again, I would imagine that we'll have quite a successful pipeline of FDI announcements in the next number of months. Are you content that we have the enough young people skilled in ICT and the sort of data management end of things to ensure that we can capitalise on those potential job announcements? Because we don't want to obviously have a situation where there still is a relatively high unemployment level.
Yes.
And there's opportunities there that we can't fill them.
Sure. Okay, thanks for those. In terms of the very specific issue around the Harlan Wolff situation, just to give a snapshot of the background to that, or our understanding of the background to that, was that this was initially viewed as being a very short-term contract. I think 60 days was envisaged at the outset. And The company took the view to go out and to recruit in the manner that they did, given the very short duration, and because there was an expectation of very strict deadlines around the completion of the work. There wasn't, to my mind, a sufficient conversation between Harland and Wolff and my department in relation to planning ahead for this. And I think we do regret that the conversation didn't happen, particularly with hindsight, given that the work is now moving into a much longer period of time. That would have allowed us advance notice and would have enabled us to consider putting in place something like a Bridge to Employment programme, which would be taking people who have some of the basic skills that are required, but to give them the scope for the very particular training that would have been required for what is actually quite specialist work. So the work that's happening in terms of the oil rigs is actually quite specialist. It's not just general work. So often we will have people who have the very good general skills, but for something where you need very particular skills, we sometimes can only be reactive. Whenever we know something is required, we can then put, if we have enough notice, we can put in place the interventions. For us, that, however, to go out and to speculatively train people it risks a wastage of public resources. So there's a balance to be found in that regard. I think there are broader lessons for us in terms of how we can better invest in maybe taking those general skills to a higher level in anticipation of some of this work coming in, and then knowing that we have to do some top-ups just to meet the very particular needs of the work at a very short period of time. It also raises a much wider issue in terms of better investment in terms of apprenticeships and a revised youth training model to ensure that we have a generally skilled workforce to take advantage of these. And I think it opens up a much wider debate around how the wider educational system is performing, because I mean, the issue about people in communities seeing jobs happening but not having the ability to compete for them is clearly a source of frustration. Obviously, the way this has manifested itself in terms of posters, etc., I think has to be condemned, and that is creating a very intimidatory atmosphere around all of this. Those who are working on this are adding to the local economy, and it's important that we in Northern Ireland are able to invest in our workers so they can compete on a level playing field, but it has to be a level playing field, both in terms of European Union law, but also just in terms of the logic of economics, where people just have to access the best talent that is available and recognise that we are part of a European and global market in that regard. So there is a challenge there for us in that respect. The second part of your question, in terms of the pipeline, in terms of FDI, and whether we are in a position to capitalise upon that, I think we are doing a lot of good work in that regard, but there is a constant challenge to ensure that we are producing the right quantum of skills to meet what is a fast rising demand. You will know as well as most, Alistair, that there is a very encouraging pipeline, and Invest Northern Ireland are working hard on a number of different avenues. My department now works alongside Invest NI as part of the Assured Skills programme, so that we can work with potential investors to address the very particular skill needs that they will have. More and more we are attracting companies based upon the skills profile of our population. That's now the lead aspect of the pitch that we're making to companies, but it's important that we are seen to be following through. So we can offer often a lot of Assured Skills programmes to provide very particular bespoke training programmes to meet the needs of employers. That's supported by the academies that we've put in place, software testing, more recently cloud and data analytics, which are being funded through our Assured Skills programme. But then that leads us back to a further step, making sure we're investing in the right numbers of people, whether it's through universities or whether it's through developing higher level apprenticeships. We can take encouragement that we have seen a considerable growth in terms of the number of applications for computer science in our universities, and also the quality of those applications in terms of the grades with people who are applying are also higher. So the message is getting out there as to where the opportunities lie in the workforce. There's a number of steps we need to be doing to really capitalise upon this. The careers review is very important as the foundation stone for this. we need to be doing much more work in terms of gender issues, because ICT is still very heavily male, about 80-20. So we need to ensure that workforce is more balanced and we're attracting more women into what is a very lucrative career, and also to ensure that we have a steady supply of people moving into university places and also into apprenticeships. I was at a launch this morning of Align IT, which is a new collaborative network for the ICT sector on the back of our ICT action plan. And their projections are that with the right interventions, we can essentially double the number of people employed in ICT in Northern Ireland over the next 10-15 years.
You know, it's very encouraging. Even in response to the first question about if the company had approached the department, I think actually there's a success story there in terms of our size. We can be quite flexible, and the prime example is Alan Overy, who identified a specific skill set in the FE sector, able to step in and provide that training. I think it's very encouraging. Just two other issues. You mentioned the zero-hour contracts, and I'm glad that you said you weren't looking at banning them, because they are hugely important. I'm sure there won't be agreement across the table on this issue, but they are hugely important. Given we have so many small companies, family businesses in Northern Ireland, they are hugely important, particularly in the catering industry, where you don't know what your order is going to be from one week to the next, and they can then pull people in to do some specific work around that, and you can't be guaranteed work in a longer term. Around the exclusivity clause, I think that would be an issue if any company is prohibiting people on zero-hour contracts from looking for work elsewhere. But obviously, if you're moving towards a position where there is a consultation on zero-hour contracts, you must have some degree of evidence about how many companies are currently using zero-hour contracts, or how many people are on zero contracts in Northern Ireland. I haven't really seen any firm evidence on that. I just wondered whether you could share any firm evidence that you as a department have on it.
Yeah. Well, to be straight on that, the evidence at this stage is still fairly weak, and it's largely anecdotal. But the anecdotal evidence we're getting is very strong. The fact that there's been some publicity around the issue over the past week has actually encouraged people to come forward and to tell their stories. And I've received a considerable number of emails from people right across Northern Ireland talking about their own personal circumstances and how they feel that they're caught in those contracts that are working against them. And there's almost a view that this is contributing to almost a poverty trap for some people, and that they are in employment, but they're not in a position to really support families, and they're really struggling on the back of the situation that they find themselves in. We are in parallel with the development of a consultation, seeking to do some research to better quantify their usage in Northern Ireland. Part of the difficulty is there's no agreed definition of a zero-hours contract. It's something that's been used in the media, particularly for the past couple of years, but it's not formally set out anywhere as to what it actually means. So if we do any legislation down the line, and there's a number of hurdles that we have to go over before we get to that point, we will need to formally define and encapsulate those. I've asked my officials to commission a piece of local research to establish the numbers as soon as we can for Northern Ireland, and I think there's enough concern, and we know the issues that are of concern, that we can run a consultation, and I think as part of that consultation we will bottom out what people are really most alarmed at, and where they believe interventions are required. Ultimately, this won't be something for me to decide. I think it's important that we reflect this has to be a collective action of the committee, the executive of the Assembly. And while Alistair, you anticipated your views may not be shared by others, I would like to think that there may be scope for common ground around better regulation, a recognition that they are part and parcel of the modern structure of employment. They can provide flexibility, but equally, given that they are a relatively new structure of employment, or much more frequently used in terms of a structure of employment, that we do need to better regulate those and provide a degree of protection. And through debate across the floor of the Assembly, I hope that we will in due course find what is the appropriate balance for our own particular circumstances. The issue in terms of the quantification of the numbers of zero-hours contracts isn't something that's unique to us. We're not an outlier in this regard. the same issues pertain in Great Britain, where they're about to launch their own formal research in the next number of weeks with a view to trying to quantify this. There's actually a pilot piece of research that's been run at present by BIS to work through the issues with a view to doing a wider consultation questionnaire over the next number of months. Now, Northern Ireland will be included as part of that, but I've taken the view that we need Northern Ireland Pacific results rather than simply being a small data set as part of a much bigger UK-wide survey. We need our own local figures just to back up anything we do locally.
Yeah, no, I mean, I acknowledge the fact that zero-hour contracts are not for everyone. Those who need a regular income are not going to be looking for work on zero, but they are perfect for some other individuals who maybe are trying to re-enter the workforce or students, whatever else, and they are hugely important for employers as well, particularly small employers.
Members, I'm just conscious, I also don't mean to cut you. I'm just-
I'll move on to the last one. It seamlessly links into the next one about the better regulation stuff.
Yes.
Obviously, Lord Curry is undertaking a piece of work in terms of better regulation. You're looking at bringing forward a review of employment law. We'll wait until see the outcome of that in terms of what the specific proposals are. But in terms of any work you've done within the department, have you done any work to look at legislation that sits under your remit that is no longer necessary, that could be removed, or pieces of legislation that could be bundled together to make it easier for employers? And if you have done that sort of work, can you give us any indication of whether you'll be repealing anything or moving it together for better regulation?
Well, first of all, as a general principle, we are committed to seeing opportunities to reduce regulation or to consolidate regulation to make interpretation of that easier, and the wider employment law reforms will hopefully address that to an extent. The most immediate example relates to the Working Time Directive regulations, where the Working Families Bill will contain clauses that will allow us to consolidate the current regulations in terms of the Working Time Directive together, and hopefully that will make its application a lot easier.
Okay, thanks all. Members, I'm conscious of the Minister's time here, so if you can be brief, Fra.
Sure, and I was going to say I'll be as brief as everybody else, but I will be brief. I'm just
I can be late for my next appointment, so just don't.
Yeah, no, and I thank the Minister for the wide-ranging presentation here this morning. It covered quite a lot of issues, but to discuss or just to touch on the question on Harlan and Wolf, I think it's important that the department moves to assure people that are working there that they're under no threat and that people will support them. And I think if you drill down on this, while there is concerns, and I think Sammy has raised some concerns, and I've spoken to people myself locally, and I think this is more to do with the local elections than local employment, and I think that needs to be pointed out also. In terms of, you spoke about the 37,000 responses to the consultation. And when it's out here, usually here what you get is a list of the usual suspects that consultation document goes out to. I think that this is a crucial issue. Obviously, there would be different party views on it, but I think it's crucially important that we try to reach as many people as possible to give them an opportunity to speak on it. And has that been considered? And if it has, what decision has been made with it?
Well, at this stage, Fra, I mean, we're still in a very, very early days. I was asked a question in the Assembly and answered as to what was going to be the future direction of travel. That was probably slightly ahead of a situation where we would be publicly announcing a consultation. Our officials are at present drafting the consultation document for Northern Ireland. We're seeking to draw upon lessons from the consultation in Great Britain. The fact they've had 37,000, I suppose, is a lot of work for them. The process was also encouraging in that they have managed to solicit a considerable number of responses. I wouldn't say this will be restricted to the usual suspects, because given my mailbox over the past week, I mean, I've had people who have been very genuine as individuals, not that they're representing organisations. They've actually come forward and talked about their own personal experiences. So we need to find a means by which we can best capture that. And the usual mechanisms may not always be the most effective, particularly if people are in very difficult working environments. They can't maybe have the time to come along to a stakeholder event and to pass on their story. But we will ask internally for consideration around the structure of the consultation as to how we can best engage. Though we're still probably several weeks away from having a draft paper for me to consider, never mind actually getting something published. But I do hope we'll have something out before the summer recess.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And I'll keep it brief, but want to comment on the United Youth. There was expectations out there that we were going to get something different that would allow people to buy into it. But it seems that the vast bulk of it was going to be new designs to old projects, and I think that may send out the wrong messages on the.
Well, can I assure you that if that's what you've picked up, I just want to assure you that's not the case. The reference to Pathways to Success and to YES was more an indication of the quantum of existing funding commitments to some of our current programmes that are set to expire in April 2015. Maybe just to give you an indication of what would be the floor in terms of a financial commitment to make this viable. But I concur with you, what your aspiration for that is to be an entirely fresh programme. It is not Pathways to Success or YES rebadged. This has to be something that's very much cross-departmental and seeking to move into new territory. The fact that we have those three different strands gives us fresh opportunities to knit things together. And to maybe give a sense of encouragement in this regard, I mean, I was out in the United States last month, and a considerable amount of the time that we were of the meetings we were having was in relation to United Youth and how we can actually either see what support we can obtain from the United States in terms of companies around placements, what we can do in terms of facilitating people from Northern Ireland going over to the United States, because you recall there's a very clear international element within the terms of reference for this, and the State Department themselves are very keen to see what they can do to support us in this regard. There is a considerable awareness within those who follow Northern Ireland in detail of the programme, and they see it as being a flagship in relation to a lot of the new work to be conducted. So just to reassure you, we see this as being a radical departure from existing patterns. But I just wanted to use those analogies just to give an idea of the floor in terms of funding from my perspective, not to suggest that's what we're going to be doing.
Could I reiterate that? I mean, at the minute, there has been significant engagement with young people and agencies, and that was organised initially through the Office of the First Minister, Deputy First Minister. We have now taken that on. So it is not something that is being designed by civil servants. That's entirely, this is an entirely different programme, and we have engaged a significant number of people. In fact, we've got someone seconded to us through SIB who has a lot of experience using youth work principles. So it is a completely different programme, or it will be, you know, when we've finished. And we'll be doing pilots as well.
And one final comment, it's just that it's quite obvious that there's an agenda there to close St Mary's, and I think it's having an impact certainly on the constituency that it's in. It's the biggest provider of the teaching of the Irish language, but it's also important, and certainly an economic impact that it could have on one of the most socially deprived constituencies. Have they been taken into consideration when you're looking at it? Because it doesn't seem that the Irish language end of it has been taken into consideration.
At this stage, I mean, no decisions whatsoever have been taken in terms of the future landscape around the teacher training infrastructure. So it's wrong for people to be jumping ahead and assuming that St Mary's is going to be closing as part of this. I've yet to receive the report from the panel that we have appointed. I don't know what's in that report. I'm not aware of what recommendations they're going to be making to me in this regard. But what I have said is that we will want to have discussions with all of the providers on the back of that report. The report will provide a number of options to me, and I will want to then have more detailed discussions with the providers around the future of the system, and we want to engage with providers, and we want to actually try to find an agreed way forward that suits the needs of teacher training in Northern Ireland as we move ahead. But I think it's important to bear in mind that the current system as it stands isn't sustainable financially. We are already paying disproportionately for our teacher training system relative to other jurisdictions, but even within the level of funding that we currently give, the system itself isn't sustainable. Never mind if you removed any of the different premia that are currently being paid to in effect subsidise the situation as we find it at present. But I would urge you to reserve judgment until you see the report and until we have those discussions.
Okay, thanks, Ralph. Phil.
Thanks, Robin and Minister, and Captain, thanks for your presentation. I have two issues I want to cover. The first one is, Minister, do you agree with Jim Allister's comments that GAA jerseys, the jerseys of one of my national sports, creates a substantial chill factor in our universities?
I think this is essentially a matter of context, and in of itself, I don't regard a GAA jersey as being a sectarian symbol. But it is something that has to be taken in the round in relation to what is an active good relations and equality programme for institutions. It is for them as autonomous bodies to work out the detail as to how that is to be taken forward. And you will note that the University of Ulster are currently considering a good relations policy in relation to their campuses. I would anticipate that isn't simply just about the issue of use of GAA jerseys, though obviously certain MLAs coming at it from that exclusive perspective. But from my point of view, I mean, whether it's Irish language sign or whether it's someone wearing a GAA jersey, in of itself, that is not a sectarian act. That would compromise good relations. The issue is in what context they are being worn or signs are being displayed. That may, in certain circumstances, create cause for concern, and those are type of issues that the university would need to bottom out themselves.
But do you agree with his phrase that it creates a substantial chill factor?
It depends upon the context that we're talking about, and that's the issue that needs to be bottomed out. In of itself, a GAA jersey is not a sectarian symbol.
As you've said, the University of Ulster have established a working group to look at this whole area, including language. Yeah. Is it your opinion that GAA jerseys should be prohibited in universities?
It's something for the universities to consider themselves. I mean, it's not for the department to come in and to say what should or shouldn't happen on a university campus. We don't have the power to do so. They are entirely autonomous bodies. They are funded from the department. We have a higher education strategy in terms of policies. There are certain outcomes that we want to see from universities in terms of how they can better support the economy. We support students in terms of finance, but universities are not non-departmental public bodies in the same way that FE colleges are. They are entirely autonomous institutions. It is for them to regulate what happens in terms of their own campuses, in line with other employers in terms of how they ensure that they have what is an inclusive environment in which activities can take place. But we are seeing an evolution in that regard, in the sense that things will have to be utterly sanitised to be an inclusive environment. That's where I think it's for the university themselves to bottom out through this working group exactly how you can manage those type of issues in a way that is inclusive, while recognising that people also have a right to express themselves.
And what about the university's own GAA teams? Would students be allowed to wear that jersey?
That's a very particular question that, again, will be considered as part of that.
Is it your opinion that this is really more about an individual member's crusade against all things Irish, as opposed to any regard for universities or the education of young people?
I would suggest that the member has perhaps a very selective range of issues that he raises at times.
Have you received many complaints about this?
As a minister, not directly, but it has been raised by a number of MLAs on the floor of the Assembly. Not just, I mean, the other issues relating to what are perceived or otherwise to be inclusive environments have been raised by others at times, yeah.
Well, there was a petition established yesterday online opposing the move to ban GAA jerseys, and to date over 1,700 people have signed it, so I presume that's more people than have complained to you.
In terms of individual complaints I've received, yes, but I mean others have their own views on the issue, and I mean, other members of the Assembly have raised concerns around what they perceive to be an inclusive environment or not an inclusive environment. But it is very much for the university to bottom this out now themselves.
Well, we might deal with that at the end of the month when we go to Coleraine. Very, very briefly, Stephen, in terms of the zero-hour contract issue, I'm not going to say that I fundamentally disagree with you or Alistair. I think the comments you're making are sensible and practical, and if we were simply to go, let's ban zero-hour contracts, what happens then? Will employers give people one-hour contracts, and what's the difference? And there are probably only a small number of companies that are abusing zero-hour contracts.
Yeah.
But do you think that the way they're being run by that small number of companies at the minute is undermining the hard-fought fight for proper rights for working people?
Well, I think it's important that we do consider this in a balanced way. I think, first of all, you're right to say that it may well be a small number of companies that they use them, and then a smaller fraction of that abuse zero-hours contracts. So we do want to try to bottom out precisely how often they're used and in what circumstances across Northern Ireland. But where there are either abuses today or where there are the potential for abuses, we do need to act and to seek to regulate them, even if that is on ultimately a precautionary basis. I mean, for example, we've taken action with respect to blacklisting. Now, that may well be not that prevalent within Northern Ireland, though I have heard some accounts in that regard, but nonetheless, where we perceive it to be a risk in terms of employment law, it is important that we do seek to act. At the same time, we do recognise that we are living in an evolving economic situation, and the structure of employment is also evolving with that, and flexibility is important for both employers and sometimes for employees. I think it's important that we don't act so onerously that we actually curtail people being employed, and that we end up inadvertently putting people back into unemployment. So we need to be facilitating people moving into work at the same time as we're providing appropriate protection for people who find themselves in a situation where they are open to abuse. And through the consultation and through the debate in the Assembly, we'll bottom out what is the appropriate balance for our own local circumstances. In terms of what you have said, in response to what Alistair has said, I mean, in terms of what you would perceive as two different ends of the spectrum, I think there is a middle ground on this issue, and I take encouragement from what both of you have said today.
My final question is, as part of this work, will you try to find out what effort or what impact zero-hour contracts are having on massaging current unemployment rates and the number of people that are on zero-hour contracts that would be underemployed?
Yeah, and that's something that we will, our survey work will try to quantify. But it's important to recognise as well that we are moving into an employment situation where people will not always be working a full 37.5-hour working week, being in full-time employment. We are seeing more part-time employment, where people are also self-employed. So there will be a mix of employment models as we evolve as a society. You're also right to say that even if we were to come in and ban zero-hours contracts, people may just create a new structure of employment around what we seek to legislate. So we need to make sure we are being as pragmatic as we can and recognising the way forward at the same time as cracking down on abuse. The term zero-hours contract is often used as a shorthand for this issue, but it also includes what you would call limited hours, where people are maybe guaranteed only a small number of hours per week as opposed to zero. It's essentially the same concept that we're seeking to address here.
Great. Thanks, Phil. Stanley?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister and Catherine, for your presentation so far. I have two questions, Chair. Minister, over this past 24 hours, there has been a lot of media attention on the royal family. And the reason why I say it is that last month, one of the members of the royal family, the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, visit the Belfast Telegraph, and they announced 50 jobs in 50 days. In fact, I think we had written to him and to thank the Telegraph. We thought it was a good initiative. But in relation to apprenticeships, and I know there's a review of apprenticeships on at the moment. I was at the Northern Ireland Assembly Business Trust yesterday. Philip McDonough was doing a presentation about the winners and losers from the budget. And one of the things he did highlight was that the importance of apprenticeships, but he said we definitely need more apprenticeships across all the sectors. What would your view be on that?
Very much so. We couldn't agree more. And we see apprenticeships as being absolutely fundamental to reshaping the skills landscape. We want to see them being applied to a much wider range of occupations and being offered up the skills ladder. Our use of apprenticeships in Northern Ireland is very small compared to other societies elsewhere in Europe and around the world. That's despite our very strong industrial heritage, where apprenticeships would have been commonplace. So we have to recapture that ethos within our economy, but to reapply it to the industries of the 21st century. I warmly welcome the Belfast Telegraph's campaign. It builds upon a similar campaign they ran a couple of years ago. They are very much aware of what we're doing around the review of apprenticeships. So this is very much a collaboration of sorts in that they are pushing and encouraging more and more employers to come forward to offer opportunities. We're currently changing the policy structure around apprenticeships. And one of the key issues we have to look at is how we can better encourage employers to create opportunities as well. Being right around the world, you will see bigger employers being more ready to offer apprenticeships than SMEs. It's just a fact of life. SMEs don't have the same support structures. They're maybe a little bit more risk averse. So we need to see how we can combat some of those perceptions, and also how we can bring SMEs together to benefit from new opportunities. And given that our profile in Northern Ireland is more based around SMEs than elsewhere, this is probably a bigger challenge for us than in others. The Duke of York himself has been a consistent advocate in this. So it's not just a case he was in for a one-off engagement with Belfast Telegraph around this issue. He has had a number of visits to Northern Ireland over the past number of years, and they are often linked directly to the economy. And he himself has taken an historic interest in apprenticeship training, and constantly raises questions in this regard whenever he's over.
Thank you very much. My second question goes back to what Farah had mentioned about Harlan Wolff and some of the jobs down there. It's been raised before, and in terms of the code of welding, and certainly your colleague, or my colleague as well, Chris Little, and I met with some people looking at the importance of code of welding, because at this point in time in Northern Ireland, people can't be trained, have to go to England, as it were. And it's the same in some of the border counties as well. Some of the people who live along there have to go to England to be trained. I think it costs about 400 quid for the code of welding. And the question I'm going to ask you is that it strikes me that there are lots of opportunities, not just in Northern Ireland, but offshore as well, for people who are code of welders. I met a taxi driver recently who was a welder in Harlan Wolff. He hasn't got his skills upgraded. The other thing he didn't want, part-time job, he wanted a safe and secure job. But he was certainly saying if he was able to be trained, he would look at a longer-term job, not just here, but maybe offshore as well. So, Minister, it strikes me that there's no doubt about it. We need some sort of a specialist training centre in Northern Ireland for code of welding. We don't have that at the moment. And as I say, Chris and I have been involved with people trying to solve this problem. So again, could I just ask your views on that?
Sure. It may not necessarily be a specialist training centre. I mean, I believe the FE sector itself should have the flexibility to respond to this. But what I think we need is a much more detailed conversation to bottom out the demand to allow the FE sector to respond to that. And Catherine, is that something you could take a particular look at? And I know you've raised it on a number of occasions, and I think we probably just need to really bottom out the issue of demand, and then see how we can be proactive through the FE sector versus also just bottoming out some of the reactive responses we can have whenever the work is there to really transform skills over a short window of time through something like Bridge to Employment. So there's two different ways we can deal with this issue. So we'll come back to you on that one.
And again, maybe I could just ask Catherine to look at this. Now, this is a UK problem. But people who get coated welded training, it's very expensive now. But once they leave that job, they leave the coated welding, it's not a certificate, it's like a tick mark behind them. So that's actually owned by the company itself. So there's some way we can look at that, so that people go through all that training and they go away and they don't have a certificate to say that they've actually completed the coated welding.
So how can it be certificated?
Yeah, and I say it's not just
Transferable certificates.
Yeah, there should be some sort of certificate so people can take up with them when they're applying for a job.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Stephen and Catherine, for your presentation. You're aware the committee's carrying out an inquiry into the area of post-19 special educational needs provision. And a question I submitted in January on post-19, you recognised that access to further education provision is an issue for rural areas, and that you've instructed officials to examine access to transport for students with a learning disability or difficulty. Can you give me an update on where that report is at and a time scale for completion?
Okay. There's probably interventions at two levels, just to set the wider landscape. I mean, first of all, there's a wider post-19 issue in terms of transitions, which the committee is developing its own inquiry around, and we're very happy to support your endeavours in that regard. That also mirrors a transitions group that's been set up under the Bamford Mental Health and Learning Disability Implementation Subcommittee of the Executive, as to how departments can better coordinate, and that transport issues is part of that narrative, because transport falls between DRD and ourselves or and health at different times, and we're seeing what more we can do at a departmental level. Then there's the very specific issue around the Disability Employment Service and strategy, and that's around the more discrete issue around how we can support people with disabilities to enter and to remain in employment, and that's where the strategy in September will be focused. On the specifics of the transport issue, Catherine, you think that's more or less complete? Or?
I thought it was. I mean, I'll check when I go back.
We'll get in touch formally on that problem.
Back to you on that.
I think it would play an important part of this inquiry as well. And also, you mentioned DRD. What about the DARD Minister? Have you had any engagements with her regarding this issue?
Yeah, we'll explore that from the rural development point of view.
I know we really haven't looked. No. I don't think we've looked at DARD.
No.
But I thought the transport one was completed, and certainly I'll come back to you directly on that.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
No problem. Chris?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Minister. I found the DEL Strategies Overview document very useful in terms of setting out the different approaches that are being taken to increase skills in Northern Ireland and also to tackle social inclusion and poverty. Is that document available online on the website?
The old one is, this one has just been updated, and even as I've gone through it, there are things that we still need to include, so it'll be on within the next couple of days.
Okay, that's great. I think that would be helpful. And in terms of the issues that Sammy Douglas has raised as well, I think it would be useful if the department were willing to meet with us in relation to those issues. I think that's something that can be agreed. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks. And just finally, a quick one from the Deputy Chair.
Very briefly, Chair, and can I commend the department on all the strategies and initiatives that they have brought forward, while we're so prone at times to complain. I think that we do have a number of strategies in place that are seeking to move forward and take the people out of their unemployment status and retrain them and get them into the place of employment. But if we look at the upskilling, because that is obviously one area where there's a lot of that required at the minute, and we seem to have 4 strategies: a skills solution, apprentice NI, leading to success, and assured skills. Are we confident that that is doing enough to reskill and to upskill the need that is there, if you like, to meet and to bridge the skills gap that currently exists?
Yeah. At present, some of those programmes do need to be refreshed, and that's what we're currently working around. Skills Solutions is essentially our outreach to business, And it may be of interest to the committee, down the line, once we have maybe further developed this work, is how we're actually engaging with our employers across the board, because I'm conscious we have a number of different outlets from the department in terms of how we relate to employers, and that we are looking to see how we can consolidate and to simplify that to avoid duplication or mixed messages. So whenever that work is more advanced, that would be useful to give the committee a briefing as to how we're taking that forward. Assured Skills itself is still, strictly speaking, a pilot programme, but it's there with the very particular purpose of supporting the work of Invest NI around creating jobs in Northern Ireland, and it's almost there as a source of special interventions to address very particular skills requirements that are facing us in order to make sure investments, for example, can happen. Apprenticeships NI and Training for Success are both currently being replaced. Apprenticeships NI will be replaced by the new review of apprenticeships, which is taking apprenticeships to a new scale in terms of how we want it to operate. It's likely to be in place fully from September 2016. And over the next number of years, for the next 2 years, you will see incrementally changes happening in advance of the final date for implementation. Training for Success, we're not happy with the level of outcomes in that regard, and it's one of the reasons that's leading us to drive the review of youth training, because we want to see a much better product for our young people.
I think there are two other things that I would say in that. Obviously, our universities support businesses directly, as well as to our further education colleges, although that's not reflected in this document. But there is more that we need to do. But as Minister says, we'll come back to you at a later date when we're further advanced in that as well.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Minister Catherine, thank you very much again for your time and for taking such a wide range of topics and questions here today. I think it is beneficial to members and the committee in general that you do this sort of session.
Yes, absolutely, Chair, and we're more than happy to discuss scheduling a further meeting in this format in the very near future, whether it's just before the summer recess or at the beginning of September. I think it's useful we have this periodic engagement and keep firing on the questions.
Not a problem. Okay.
That's great. Okay,
thank you very much.
See you soon.
Catherine. Okay, members, just moving on to point 12 on our agenda is the briefing from the University of Ulster on the establishment of a school for veterinary medicine. Members, just be aware this will be hand-started. The briefing's at page 183 of your packs, and could I just welcome Professor Richard Burnett, Vice-Chancellor of the University of Ulster, Professor Carl Curran, Dean of the Faculty of Life and Health Sciences, and Professor John Callum, Norbert Chair in Pharmaceutical Science in the University of Ulster. Good morning. Still is good morning so far. So,
okay, well, good morning.
Over to you.
I begin, Chairman. So, thank you for your welcome, and thank you also for inviting us to make this presentation to you today and discuss this important issue with you. I'll just say three things by way of introduction, then I'm going to hand over to John Callan, who holds the Norfolk Professorship in Pharmaceutical Sciences, who will make the presentation to you. Just by way of introduction, I think you're all well aware that the University of Ulster exists for a very simple reason, and that is to work in partnership to promote the economic, social and cultural development of this region. A key component of the economy is the agri-food industry. It is our largest industry. It is an industry that's identified as for its importance and its potential growth in the programme for government and in the economic strategy. A key skill, and I noticed you were talking about skills earlier, a key skill in supporting that industry is veterinary medicine. Yet in this region we have no training of vets. Yeah, and what I would wish to say in what we're talking about this is clearly the vets that we would train would be qualified for all sectors, but the focus of our vet school would be on animal health and welfare. It would be about supporting the agri-food industry. It would not be focused on domestic animals. Clearly the vets we train could go and work in that sector, but vet schools specialise in different things. We would focus on animal health and welfare to support the efficiency and effectiveness of the industry here. That would be the focus of the school. We're looking at this because we were approached from the industry to do so. So it's us responding to the industry. When we asked to look at it by the industry, we've consulted more widely. We have support not only from the industry, but also we have support from the veterinary bodies. We have support from DARD and the DARD Minister for this, and we have support from CAFRE because we would offer it in partnership with the college, with CAFRE. So we've got widespread support for the initiative. And finally, I would say in terms of the University of Ulster, a key part of our mission is to provide socially inclusive higher education, to provide access to the professions from those from all sections of society. And if you look at those people from this region who at the moment are able to go and train as a vet, I mean, it's basically, you could say, it's a rich person's club. Very few people from, working class backgrounds actually can avail of the opportunity to train as a vet because of the sheer cost, because they need to go elsewhere. So there would be that aspect, the accessibility to the profession as well. So it's supporting a key industry. There's a key skills gap there in terms of vets, and it would also provide opportunities in an inclusive way. So in summary, that's what it's about. But John is going to put more flesh on those bones, and I think you've got John's presentation in front of you.
Members starting at page 186.
Okay, John. So
thanks, Vice-Chancellor. I'd just like to also thank the committee for the opportunity to brief you on our plans for a new School of Veterinary Medicine. The Vice-Chancellor has illustrated our motivation behind establishing a School of Veterinary Medicine in Northern Ireland, responding to the needs of local industry to try and make a veterinary profession a career choice that more students in Northern Ireland can follow, and also to improve the sort of R&D capacity in the area of veterinary science in the north, and to increase the competitiveness of the sector internationally. And really the main driver for us is the strength of the agri-food industry here in Northern Ireland. It's the largest industry in Northern Ireland, currently valued at £5 billion per annum. It's also proven to be a very robust industry. It's continued to grow throughout the economic recession, and that's been recognised by the Executive in their programme for government, and also in the economic development strategy, where they've identified the agri-food sector as one of 5 target areas for future growth. And indeed, the Agri-Food Strategy Board's Going for Growth strategy has planned to increase the size of this industry further by 40% to £7 billion by the year 2020. And in addition, and with that, there'll be an increase in the personnel, an increase in jobs from 100,000 to about 115,000 as well, associated with that planned increase. And in addition to that, there's also an expected increase in livestock numbers by increase about 65% again by 2020. And I think that's a significant increase in livestock numbers from where we are currently, and I think that will also require an investment in the education and training and the personnel associated with handling those livestock, and also the produce that results from them. And one of the professions that play a critical role in this is the veterinary profession in areas such as livestock husbandry, herd health, disease control and public health. And I think it's with such a planned increase in livestock numbers, it's obvious that there's also going to be a requirement for an increased number of vets to help manage or to help support the increase in livestock numbers. And very sort of conservative estimates that we have, or calculations that we have done, have projected that by 2020 we'll need approximately an extra 25% of increase in vets per annum in the province here. So the current situation, as we're aware, we wouldn't be sitting here if there was a School of Veterinary Medicine in Northern Ireland. Currently, students are forced to leave the province and they must go to either England or Scotland, to Dublin, the only School of Veterinary Medicine on the island of Ireland, or, which is becoming more common now, to universities in the EU. And obviously this, for Northern Ireland students, results in significantly higher costs in terms of the increased fees, the subsistence, the travel, etc., compared to doing a comparable degree in Northern Ireland, say, for medicine. So, and in addition to the high cost, there's also a very, very high competition for places. And the new School of Veterinary Medicine that's opening in Surrey in September of this year, there's over 740 applications for just 45 places and available in the first year of that course. And in Edinburgh, it's a similar situation with 1,000 applications for 70, or just over 70 funded places there. So, and there is evidence that, you know, Northern Ireland students struggle to gain access on GB courses in Scotland and England. So the current situation is that there's approximately 50 Northern Ireland students per year that leave the province to go and study veterinary medicine. About 30 of those go to either England or Scotland. Between 8 and 10 go to the Republic of Ireland, and about between 12 and 15 approximately go to the EU. And I think it's an interesting point to note that there's now 11 universities in the EU that teach veterinary degrees in the medium of English, while in the UK there's only 7. And, you know, as I mentioned before, the cost for our students to access veterinary education in GB is in the region of £100,000 for the 5-year degree. And that's money that's been spent outside the province that could be spent here in Northern Ireland. And there's also evidence to suggest that in a study of the vets, a HESA report on the vets that graduated in the past 3 years, 98% of those vets come from the more affluent socio-economic groups, whereas for the Northern Ireland population as a whole, 48% are represented by those groups. So there's also evidence that the status quo, the current situation, is prohibitive to students from less advantaged backgrounds accessing veterinary medicine. So our proposal is to establish a School of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Ulster. We believe this will guarantee a supply, or allow us to control the supply of suitably trained vets, and also help they support the local agri-food sector, and also improve access for a lot more Northern Ireland students who would like to pursue a career in veterinary medicine. As I mentioned, the term suitably trained there is important, because the Northern Ireland economy is very strongly agri-food related, and over 60% of our vets that are registered that work in Northern Ireland work in the agri-food sector, and in the UK, in GB, the same value is 20%. So it's no surprise then that the colleges the universities in GB, because there's such a low emphasis on agri-food there, the quality of training in livestock husbandry and GB degrees has been seen to be lacking. So I think another important aspect of establishing a veterinary school at the University of Ulster will be the improved research and development opportunities that will come along with the new School of Veterinary Medicine. And there is, in the Growing for Growth document, it has stated that Northern Ireland is significantly behind the top performers such as the US, Sweden and Finland, and also the Republic of Ireland in R&D investment in the area of agri-food. So a new veterinary school would certainly increase the amount of R&D capacity that's been aligned with the agri-food industry. And another aspect is that currently vets that are practicing in Northern Ireland must the majority of them must leave the province to go and do their CPD. There's limited CPD opportunities available in Northern Ireland, and indeed the Chief Vet has recognised the importance of a new veterinary school here that will help drive up standards of the profession in general through the increase in CPD. So when we've done our sort of preliminary work and looking to see how we could best deliver a veterinary education in Northern Ireland, we've considered many different options, including where would we locate the proposed veterinary school, what type of curriculum model would we use? And when we mean curriculum model, we, I suppose in the broadest sense, we mean, would we operate a high-end referral hospital on our own campus, or would we, which is becoming more increasingly common now and has been adopted by Nottingham and the new school in Surrey, would we distribute the clinical teaching through partner practices throughout Northern Ireland? They're called clinical associates. So there's two main models. There's the one where you do your clinical teaching, and the majority of your clinical teaching on-site on a referral hospital, or off-site in identified partner practices throughout the province. And then finally, we're also looking at the numbers that are required. So when to meet the demand, what numbers would be required to meet the demand, and also the minimum number that we could operate with to make it commercially viable. So we did the analysis. Our Coleraine campus emerged as a preferred location for several reasons. We have a lot of available infrastructure there from teaching and learning, such as laboratories, equipment, and also a lot of synergies both in teaching and research. So, for example, we've a lot of courses in the area of pharmaceutical science, pharmacy, biomedical science, and nutrition that can provide synergies in teaching with the proposed veterinary medicine programme. And in addition, we also have a lot of R&D expertise there in different areas that are also synergistic with veterinary medicine, such as drug delivery, microbiology, human nutrition, etc. So, I'd say that once we did the analysis, the Coleraine campus has emerged as a preferred location. And next, we then looked at what sort of curriculum model we would like to would be best suited to deliver the programme. And the operation. So, just to give you an idea, that vets is normally veterinary medicine is normally a 5-year degree. The final year of that is almost entirely clinical, where the students will enter into a rotation cycle, very much like in medicine, where they would do rotations in various different disciplines of the clinical teaching, such as, say, small animal medicine, small animal surgery, large animal medicine, equine, exotics, etc. And there's two approaches to service that clinical teaching. One is where there will be a hospital, a referral hospital on site, where the students would enter rotations in different disciplines in the hospital throughout their final year. The second option is, as I mentioned before, is a distributed model, where instead of having a referral hospital on site, they would distribute that through identified partner organisations throughout, both private and government, throughout the province. And again, when we looked at the preferred model, we found that the distributed model emerged as the preferred option. And that was basically mainly because it's, for several reasons, it's very costly to build and operate a referral hospital. Depending on where the location of the referral hospital is, and even I think in Northern Ireland in general, it would be very difficult to get adequate caseloads for students to get a good clinical teaching. And also, a referral hospital would work in direct competition with the private practices throughout Northern Ireland, with the veterinary practices in Northern Ireland. And, you know, we are keen to work with the profession and not to alienate the profession when we're delivering this new programme. So the distributed model, as I say, to test the feasibility of the distributed model, it was important that we got the support from the partners that we would need if we were to take the distributed model forward. So we've had initial discussions with various providers, and the main ones probably are CAFRE, the Vice-Chancellor mentioned, in the areas of livestock husbandry, animal husbandry, etc., AFBI in the area of postmortem pathology, and numerous second opinion practices and referral practices throughout the province. Also Tully equine practice as well for equine medicine. So like the Earlswood Referral Hospital, we've had discussions with them. Other private practices and farm animal practices, we've also had discussions with them. As the Vice-Chancellor mentioned, we also have support from the Dard Minister, and also very strong support from the Chief Vet. And you know, they see the proposed veterinary programme, A, to support the Going for Growth strategy, and B, to help drive up standards among the profession. So I say we're very, very strong support from Dard. In terms of identifying the sort of numbers that we would require, we have estimated that by 2020, if Going for Growth is implemented, then Northern Ireland will require in the region of 60 to 65 vets per annum. Our current starting point, we would anticipate starting at 50 and then react to see if there is a requirement for any more. Obviously, HEFCE guidance indicates that veterinary degrees are Band A or Group A, which is the highest banding for all 5 years of the programme, and that's currently valued at 15,643 per annum per FTE. So that would result in an annual commitment of DEL of 782,150 for the 50 FTEs per annum, just under 4 million if the full 5 years were in operation. So just to give you an indication where we are at the minute, we have submitted a green. We were requested by DEL, the department, to submit a full Green Book economic appraisal. We did that before Christmas. We got initial feedback from that, and we've responded to the feedback, and we're now in a position to submit the document probably today, or if not today, tomorrow, back to DEL, and then we will await their response. But I think, in summary, it's difficult to see how Going for Growth from an economic point of view can be undertaken or delivered if there's no investment in the training for vets in Northern Ireland, and particularly vets with a strong focus on food-producing animals. And again, the sector will benefit significantly from the increased R&D activity, the innovation that's associated with a new School of Veterinary Medicine. So again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity, and obviously we'll take some questions.
Okay, thank you very much, John.
Okay, no, that's fine. Carol has been leading in our discussions. This would be a partnership with CAFRE, as John mentioned. It's a distributed model, and that brings the cost down substantially. To establish an old-fashioned vet school where the university seeks to those all and has a vet farm on site is very costly. So this is working with the vets. Working with the veterinary practices also helps to enhance the quality there, because those vets would be part-time staff for us whilst working as vets. So there's an interaction with develops continuously for a large number of vets. But Carol, do you want to say anything on CAFRE? Because John Fay and the team at CAFRE would be enthusiastic supporters of what we're doing, as AFBI would be.
We've met several times, obviously, to discuss this with CAFRE, and we already have other areas of provision where we collaborate with them, so we're very familiar with them as an organisation. And just to also say on the referral hospital side, I mean, we did explore all of the models, irrespective of, if it was going to be a more costly model. But when we drilled down into that, some of the providers on the UK mainland who have referral hospitals, they're not without their difficulties, because actually by the time the animals are presented at that referral hospital, the assessment has already been made, and it's those assessments that the students need to have achieved by their first day competence. So actually we do believe that that model is more fit for purpose, and as the Vice-Chancellor has said, CAFRE are very keen to partner with us in this, and it fits very well with a lot of things that they're already undertaking.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Folks, very strong, well-put case. I think I'll be enough to support, but why not before now? Why has nobody else picked it up, in your opinion?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I can't say what our predecessors did all those years ago. I mean, it's what I can say is that we work closely with industry, and our partnerships with industry. It was industry that came to us. Clearly, they see a skills shortage here at the moment. As John said, I think there's perhaps a public perception that people who go into veterinary medicine then perhaps act as sort of the high street vet. Well, that's the minority, and that's not the focus of what we're talking about. Most vets are actually working with food producers and out there. So we are, talking about animal health and welfare, that side of it, large animal veterinary practice. But I guess the other thing is that the just sheer growth and the importance of the quality of food products and the growth of that sector, the shortage is being highlighted now. It's going to be held back by a skills shortage, that sector, the key growth sector.
I think in addition to that as well, Vet NI have been lobbying quite hard for a number of years now on trying to get some support, not necessarily a veterinary school here in Northern Ireland, but support for the students from Northern Ireland that are pursuing a career in veterinary medicine and GB. So it's certainly been on the agenda of the profession here for quite a long time. I think we're just sort of reacting now to the real need, and particularly, as I said, if Going for Growth is to be implemented, there's going to be a significant increase in livestock numbers in the province that will have to be managed, and you know, the vets play a key role in that.
Your engagement with CAFRE then regarding to their veterinary nursing courses, how will that supplement what you're doing, or is there any crossover there?
Yes, I mean, we've had discussions in relation to that, and I think that that's something that we would very much like to bring in alongside this proposal. I mean, we have talked to CAFRE about it, and we think that that would add further strength to what it is that we're seeking to achieve.
Okay. CPD, you touched on briefly. What's the demand for veterinary CPD? Is it regularly? Is it mandatory? Is it optional?
Yeah, I think they have to do a certain amount of CPD to keep the registration, as with many of the different professional bodies. So I think some of it can be done online, remotely, but you know, depending on the sort of certificates or qualifications that they want to get with it, a lot of them have to travel to GB, to the schools of veterinary medicine and GB to be able to accomplish that. So there's increased cost there. There's downtime as well for doing that, that perhaps we could offer by a new school of veterinary medicine.
In the Faculty of Life and Health Sciences, we have very many of the professions already there, so we're very familiar with the CPD model and the different requirements. So again, we feel very well placed to meet that demand.
I see you'll have a built-in market there as well, near enough as well. Just finally, you have a Green Book appraisal the way to the department. What's your feelings? Are they supportive? Are they not? Or do you want to comment at this stage?
Well, we submitted a first draft of the Green Book appraisal way back in
before Christmas.
December, yeah. And it came back in January.
Yeah, I mean, I think the comments that came back were quite low level.
So it's not, they were not fundamental to what we were saying. They were
really just seeking clarification on a number of areas.
Okay, thanks. Sally?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks very much for the presentation. Excuse my ignorance, but in terms of the, you mentioned about agri-food sector and about livestock, and you want to set up a veterinary medicine school. Would that include, say, like I have 2 cats where I take my cat to a vet? Does it include that as well? It's not just for agri.
It includes everything, as I say. You know, they'll be trained in all aspects of veterinary medicine, but the focus from a teaching and research point of view will be on the food producing animal.
If I can add, to qualify, they have to have what's known as first aid competencies. So you have to, that's how it's judged, the output. So they would be competent to work in any sector. But as John said, the focus of a lot of schools elsewhere is on that domestic animal side. So although they're qualified to work on the large animals, that's not where their specialism has been. And that's what the industry is pointing to, the relative weakness there. Whereas ours would be very much focused on the large animal side, although they would be competent to go in the domestic side. That's the focus.
Yeah. And obviously, Richard, that's a big growth area as well. If you think of the number of people now have household pets, I was at a thing yesterday, the Cats Protection League here. If you'd asked me 5 years ago, was I going to something like that, I wouldn't have thought of it. Yet I have 2 cats, and it was actually very interesting. And listen, see other MLAs there as well. There are questions, John, I think you had mentioned that 98% of people who graduate now are from the most affluent areas. There's that 2%, and that's certainly some of the areas that we would be keen on, those disadvantaged areas. How do you propose to improve the access for them?
Well, partly the fact there's opportunities here, it would improve the access first of all, because at the moment they're having to go elsewhere and the fees are £9,000 a year and they would be 3.5 here. So that would, the fact it's local, and that would improve the access in itself. The other thing that the university does, you know, we do not, and this costs us places in league tables, but we're not focused on those league tables. We're focused on servicing the community here. We do not admit simply by A-levels. If we did, we could shift our A-levels up and move up the league tables. And I know some people would like us to do that, but that would actually, you know, be detriment to widening access. So, for example, in the allied health professions, where we could certainly ask at least 3 A's and admit on that, we don't. We ask 3 B's. That costs us places in league tables. But I think it's better because what we do is that we actually assess on their fitness to actually work in a caring profession. So they do an aptitude test for a caring profession, And then, subject to passing that and being in the top of that, they come in with the lower good A levels, but not. Right. Some other universities fixated with league tables we could put up the passing grades. In a similar way, I would envisage, in veterinary medicine, we wouldn't just do it by A levels. We would actually do it by, well, what's a competency test? How can somebody demonstrate that they've got a competency and an interest in this sector? That's what we do across the piece, as far as possible. Again, in nursing, we would do it by interviews, etc., not simply by A levels. Now, those of you, and there may be some members of the committee who want us to move up league tables, we can stop doing that, and we can do it simply by A level. But what I would say is you'd be disadvantaging people from many of your communities if we did it.
And obviously,
that would be, what we.
Our programme for government is very much also about creating employment, but also about targeting specific areas of need. Could you legally set a quota or a percentage that you would take students from those disadvantaged areas? Would that be legal to do that?
Yeah, I mean, what we've not done in the past, and I think it was something that was mooted some time ago, and some universities do it in England. It's based on somebody's socio-economic background, and then looking at that, and the University of Bristol looks at it in what school and what's the average A-level performance in the school. And if you're going to a school that's a relative poor performing school, you get a slightly lower offer than if you go into a high performing school. That's something we could look at. We've not done, and I think there was quite a bit of opposition actually from your party when it was mooted that might be done. But it's something.
I was in the party that said, but I was a big supporter.
But I mean, I think.
But that's something we can do.
As with the First Minister as well.
I think one of the other things that we do that we look very closely at the backgrounds from which our students are drawn.
Yeah.
And we examine those data, and sometimes we target our recruitment drives to those areas where we know we find it difficult to draw students from. So we sort of do it the other way around. We try to be proactive in particular areas within Northern Ireland where we find it difficult to recruit students.
Right. And just my final question. You mentioned about the economic appraisal, that Green Book. I've been involved in some of those appraisals when there have been over 100 questions have come back. Anyway, that's another story. What are the options within the Green Book appraisal at this stage, apart from the option you put up here, John?
Well, this was the preferred option. I mean,
it's preferred option.
We looked at the different campuses, but then clearly we've got the synergy with the subjects. The benefit of the Coleraine campus is that, as John said, the life sciences are there in terms of that aspect. Another option would be, we had early on to do the old-fashioned vet school where we do everything, and that's not the way we work. And so, I mean, this is the preferred option, and that's going forward. I mean, if you looked at that, that's from it. You could do it from the larger point of view of a full cost-benefit analysis, which the Assembly might be interested in. You've got a key growth sector here. You've got a key skills shortage in the key growth sector. So what's the impact of that on the economy and achieving your targets if you don't close that skills gap?
Okay.
We did put forward different models for the student number, but what we've presented to you today is actually what we consider to be the minimum student number. So,
and just to say, not a question, just say thanks for the presentation. Was excellent, very clear. Well done, John. Thank you.
Solid. Tom?
Yeah, again, can I commend you on the presentation? Very, very well put. And you did say the DARD Minister, you have the support of the DARD Minister, and I've no doubt that apart from the Green Book or the appraisal at the minute, that you would have had some sort of discussions with the department, with Dale or with the Minister, with the officials. How did you find them in supporting this proposal, if you like?
Well, I think they've been pretty agnostic, I would say. I mean, they're saying that, if there are extra student numbers, it's for us to allocate those student numbers. Tom, I mean, the thing here is they're Band A student numbers, which are the expensive ones, because veterinary is similar to medicine. And so that's the additional cost. So they're looking at it, I guess, just simply from that point of view. They've not expressed, I think it's fair to say, a view on whether or not veterinary medicine in itself is something we should be going for, other than we'll make the case and we'll look at it. Isn't it? Yeah, it's not. So. Yeah, so they've been pretty neutral on the thing, I would say.
I think it's the first time we've been asked for a full Green Book appraisal for student numbers. There's normally capital projects.
Yeah. Well, obviously, if you were to get the green light in this, how long would it take you to get this up and running? You know, when would you foresee that you could have this up and running at the university?
Well, there is a time constraint, obviously, for student advertising. It has to be in the prospectus about 16 months before we plan to take our first intake. So, for example, we'd need to be advertising very soon to now to make a 2015 September intake. So there's significant time constraints with this, and you know, the later that we get get confirmation that the places will be available, the later that we can offer this. And it's just basically, you know, so if we go past a sort of 18 months prior to our planned intake by a month, it could delay it by a year. So it's imperative, in my opinion, that we get a decision as soon as we possibly can.
I mean, the programme will be offered through UCAS, and there's a certain timetable for that, so that's our biggest constraint.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Tom. David?
Chair, my questions on accessibility on start date have been answered. No animals, and other than, is there anything in it for the Georgetown campus? That's about it.
Well, there's not. There's something in it for East Antrim vets, though, isn't it? Some of the veterinary practices.
Yeah, as I say, we've had discussions with a lot of key practices that we have that we see critical to be able to deliver the distributed model, and I say they will be dispersed throughout the province and many different constituencies throughout the province. So we'll be, you know, engaging with the profession in different regions throughout Northern Ireland.
Okay, thank you, David. Bronwyn?
Yeah, I mean, I've really nothing to add except to say that I am supportive of what you are doing. I come from the farming community, and I know that the Food Standards Agency are involved in carrying out on-farm inspections. So I would say it would be useful to have an engagement with them as well regarding all of that. I also see a gap in terms of animal cruelty. There's a big issue in my own area, Clare Valley, of horse cruelty, where people who come out to view these animals are not vets, and I see a big gap there. And it's something that we have raised with the Minister, people who don't have that training. So it's something for yourselves to consider.
Okay, John, then the food standards. That's...
Yeah, I think that, you know, the majority of vets that work with, a lot of the vets that work with STAR will work in the area of food, you know, so definitely it's something that we will engage with and we'll contact them. And
Just one point, then, probably like Sammy, I think it's logical when it's so important, especially agri-food industry and farming to the north. I live in a fairly built-up constituency, but believe it or not, 30% of the constituency is rural. And I think sometimes it's often forgotten that there are quite a number of constituencies that may look built up, but it has a rural element to it, and I think it's quite logical that, to go down the direction that you're going.
Thanks for that.
Okay, nobody else has indicated. Richard, John, Carl, thank you very much for your time, and I think you can gain from the committee's response that there is a degree of support here for your endeavours at this minute in time. So I think we'll ask the department to keep us up to date with their deliberations as we go forward. So. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, members, any other business? Sammy?
Just one small thing, Chair. Last week I had to sponsor this group, Include Youth and Business in the Community. It was a programme called Aiming High, and it was a number of young people who had come from very difficult backgrounds in a whole training programme. And I just there was a tweet on this morning, a young fella that I had met. He just got a full-time job out of it, but it was a truly inspirational programme. And just to say that I'd said to him they should maybe contact us because maybe to come and just tell us about the programme that they're involved in. But again, it's okay reading these reports, but when you meet people, you know, seeing is believing, and inspirational. Young people from some most difficult backgrounds, you know, coming through a programme like that, and Edison Business in the Community and Include Youth. Excellent organisations.
So we can put them in the list for forward work programmes, but whether we get them this side.
I understand that, that's okay, yeah.
As long as we have them detailed there. Members, any other business? If not, members, thank you very much for your attendance. Date, time and place of next meeting. The committee will not meet again until after Easter recess. And on return, will be the visit to the Coleraine campus. The next meeting will take place at 10 a.m. Wednesday, the 7th of May, room 29 in Parliament Buildings. Meeting's adjourned.
Room 30.
Room 30.
It's been changed to 30.
All right.
Assembly Committee Room 29. This is